talk about our national restoration plan. That's very similar to the plan you got in your hands, done by your government, IUCN and WI. So we are in the process to finish. We already have the first version, but we are in public consultancy. So we are consulting states, agriculture sectors, private sector, NGOs. We are consulting everyone to get the second version. When you got the second version, we are working to organize an interministerial group to lead that effort. After that, I will talk a little bit about payment for existing services that we are, some projects we are doing, we are taking that approach in Brazil. I will also talk about restoration with native species of economic interest. What is that? It's not about eucalyptus, because eucalyptus is a non-native species in Brazil too. And I will also talk about Atlantic Forest Pact. I will call Pacto, because it's the way we call that movement in Brazil. So Pacto is about restoration governance. So I will talk a little bit about that. The Amazon is the biggest water fresh water reserve in the earth. So we have in Amazon, just in that small piece of land, we have 80% of the fresh water in the earth. 80. So it's a lot of water. But the problem is that the water is far from the main cities, the big cities. So we have a tricky situation in Brazil. We have a lot of water, and we have a water scarcity. And also we have Cerrado, that's in the central part. It's a savanna, it's the Brazilian savanna. It's quite similar with the national park we visited. I forgot the name of it. Yeah, I can't reproduce it yet, but I will learn. And we also have Caatinga. That is an arid region from Brazil. It's here. It's arid because there's a lot of windy that come from the Antarctica region. So because that is windy, and it's hot and windy, and there's no water. Well, we have Atlantic Forest. So 70% of the Brazilian GDP comes from that region. The biggest cities is along the coast. So it's a very important region for us. And because Atlantic forests are being so occupied by human beings, a lot of economic activities too, we have just 12% of the native vegetation in that biome. So it's the most endangered biome in Brazil. And here we have this diagram. Cities invading forests. It's how Atlantic forest looks like. And we also have Pampa. It's like a grassland. People used to produce a lot of cattle here. So I heard that in Kigali you have a Brazilian restaurant that called Gaúcho Nairobi. In Nairobi. Ah, sorry. I was. Well, it's most of famous beef from Brazil comes from this place. And actually, they are producing a lot of beef in Amazon. And this is one of the key. Is the key. Is the key problem to deforestation in Amazon. We have a lot of protected areas and indigenous land too. I don't know if you have this concept here, but indigenous land is not a protected area. is an area that is managed by indigenous people. So it's quite different from protected area, because protected area there's no one living on that. And in that case it's more, I would say it's more culture than biodiversity. So 20% of our land is protected area or indigenous land. And we have three main laws, three main, I'd say, legal instruments to govern the biodiversity, or to address biodiversity and forest in Brazil. The first one is the National System of Protected Area. That will define the types of protected area and what kind of activities you can do inside those areas. And the second, we have the Estatuto do Índio. That is the law that help us to that address the indigenous people land. And the third is the Forest Code or Forest Act that take care about the forest in the private lands. Because in Brazil we have, you can buy a land and that land is yours. So, and the most important law is the Forest Code. Why? Because 73% of the total forest in Brazil is in private hands. It's inside private lands. Because that is so important for us. Oh, here's just to get you a dimension of the Brazilian forest. We have 52 million meter cubed in natural forests, and we have 230 million meter cubes in plantation forests. By plantation mean pine, eucalyptus, and other quantity of other species. So basically, native and non-native. And you can see that the number of non-native is much higher than the native one. Well, let's start to talk about our forest code. 2012 was a very challenging year for the environmental movement in Brazil. Because we have a law, the Forest Code, that law born in 2065 to keep the forest up. That is the main target of that law. And in 2012, the agribusiness sector that has a very huge influence in the Congress decided to change the law. And we kind of lost this battle. We, I mean, environmentalists. So, we have the concept of legal reserve. It's a portion of forest that each kind of rural property has to keep in the property. So in Amazon region, the landowners have to keep 18% of their total land in the forest. They have to keep the forest in 80% of the land. In the transition between Cerrado and Amazon, in the transition between Amazon and Cerrado is 34. In Cerrado and the rest of the country is 20%. So if you have a land of 10 hectares and you are located in Atlantic forest, you have to keep 2 hectares of forest. You can manage the forest, you can, but it has to be a sustainable management. You can't harvest cut the total cover. You can management in a sustainable way. The second point, all the top of mountain is protected. So if you have a mountain, if you are in the property, and that property is located in the top of mountain, like in the green portion, unfortunately you can have agriculture. You have to keep the forest. You have to manage your forest. And the most complicated one is the riparian area. So, depends on the size. I will not go into detail because it's so boring. But depends on the size of the property and the length of the river. You have to have a certain portion of a riparian area in your land. It's so complicated. We actually developed an app to calculate those areas because it's, in the field it's so complicated to define it. So just to have an idea, how is the forest code? Any doubt? So if you are in São Paulo, each municipality has one fiscal mode. That is a given size of land. So if you are in São Paulo, you can find some municipalities that have the fiscal mode of 16 hectares. But if you go to Amazon, in some municipalities you can find the fiscal that could be 400 hectares. So it varies a lot. Each municipality has one specific number of that. So with those changes, I don't show you the changes. I just show the concepts. But with the changes that was made by the agribusiness influencing your forest code, we reduce from a potential area to be restored of 100 million hectares to 21 million hectares. So because that, I used to say that was an environmental disaster. We lost that battle. But, on the other hand, it's a negotiation. It's a social negotiation process. In another hand, now it's mandatory. They have to do it. In the previous moment, in the previous version of the forest code, they don't have to. It's quite complicated, But now they have to. So we have this huge challenge to restore 21 million hectares. Just to summarize the history. And here's the lands that we need to restore. In red is the most priority lands that we need to restore. In yellow is the second category. It's a kind of the degree of the areas that we need to restore. Where are the areas we need to restore? So the basic concept to apply in those green and yellow areas is take the degraded areas like that one, and through restoration techniques become them in native vegetation. So, and when I mean native vegetation, I mean biodiversity. Our restoration is much focused on biodiversity. It's what we're looking for. When we call about restoration, we are talking about bringing the biodiversity back, or create the enabler condition for that. Wow, this is kind of confusing, but it's just the process that things happen. I will not spend too much time on that. And finally, the Brazilian plan for recover the native vegetation. So last year we spent almost the 12 months talking and planning and preparing the national plan, the first version. So it is a good moment for us. Why? Because we already have a commitment with the bond challenge did by Pacto. And also in the last 3rd June, our president announced an international commitment to restore 12 million hectares. So this is the base for our national restoration plan. So then we start to work on that. We faster on the national plan for recovery. I will call Planaveg. That is the acronym in Portuguese. And the target is to restore 12.5 million hectares in 20 years. It's a lot of work. So when we start to plan, to prepare this plan, we take as a base some laws we already have. So we are bringing trying to bring the other laws engage on that. So the forest code, how to increase. We have some law that was to guide us to increase the productivity in the country, and also to improve and clarify the land title. That is a big issue in Brazil. So the idea is to work on these 3 spheres: to motivate people to do restoration, to create the atmosphere, the neighbor condition to people do it, and finally to do it. So basically, is that the point? The points of the Planaveg, the 8 key points of our national plan. That I will go through this now. First, to create awareness. People have to know why we are doing restoration, mainly the rural property. So we plan. We are not started yet, but we plan to create a communication campaign, the media campaign. Use all the communication instruments that we have. Could be printed, could be seminars, could be television, everything, to make people know that it's important to do restoration and why is the benefits to do restoration. The second is seeds and seedlings. So stimulate the market, create the capacity building to the nurseries and seed collectors. The third one is to create a market for the products that will be planted, the native species, to create a market for that. So timber, no timber, essential oil, fruits, every kind of product that the Brazilian native biodiversity could provide. It's a target for us to create a market for it. And when I mean create a market, it's an internal market. Because instead we consume potato, we can consume cassava, that is native from Brazil. Instead to consume orange as a juice, and we consume it a lot, you can go for a native juice. So, and to change the behavior of the consumers, you have to go for the market. You have to communicate it. You have to create the desire for it. And also, find money. Understand what are the money that the Brazilian government has to invest on that. Understand and find for international investment also. So understand what the money come from to finance those activities that we needed. Rural extension. So the idea here is to We have a rural extension service, as you also have here, but they are not prepared to deal with restoration issues. They are most prepared to deal with potato, maize, sugar cane, but they are not prepared to deal with native species. So we have to train them to deal with that, to help our landowners to do so. And the special monitoring, you know, it's a way we need to watch if the land cover is changing or not. So we have to monitor it. It's another challenge that we put on our plan. In history, and it's an image from Rio de Janeiro. Who knows? Rio de Janeiro, Copacabana, Samba. It's there, Rio de Janeiro. Here's a very well famous mountain in Rio de Janeiro, and it was recovered. So if you do once, we can do it again, and again, and again. It's a very broad concept. I will not go into the details, but basically, you have to have an institutional arrangement. And the key question here is, who will pay? Who will plant the seedlings? Where is the priority area? So some important question to define the framework or the arrangement. Well, here is just talking about one of the priority watersheds that Cantareira system. I don't know if you heard about, but we are suffering a very serious problem in terms of scarcity, water scarcity in São Paulo. In our key reservoirs, we have just 14% of water in our reservoir to supply the biggest city in Latin America. So it's a very big problem. And we are trying to convince the decision makers to invest in restoration, instead green infrastructure. We come to the farm. The farm has to sign that he is interested, and most of them it's interested because it's about getting money. So we're talking about money. People, oh, let's do what it is. So we make a map. We define the priority areas, and then, well, here it's a mapping that we have. It's a basic map. For example, that guy want to become a partner of the project. That guy don't. So we go for those who really want to participate. So it's a way to get a better communication with landowner. I don't know if it happens here, but in Brazil, when you convince, it's the conversation between one landowner and other is much more efficient than rural extension try to convince them. So we try to convince those ones that already manifested desire to be engaged on the project. And then we make a concept project, like where is the pasture that he have to improve, what is the area they have to restore, and then we show them. And then he looked at and he decided, no, I don't want to go for that. I just want to restore that area and work on that pasture. It's okay, because the value we are paying is per hectare. So if he decides to go for that, he will get more. But he can decide for this one for some personal reason. So it's not an obligation to accept the recommendations. So there is a conversation with the landowner to find the executive project. After that, we go sign an agreement. In that agreement is written what will be the activities that will be implemented in their property, and also is written how much they will gain, and is also written that if he have the responsibility to take care about the infrastructure we are bringing to the property. If he caused some damage, he have to pay for it. And then here we have several techniques. I think Andrea will cover it much better than I. But seed planting, directed seed planting, seedling planting, some machines that we use to improve the efficiency of the restoration work. And then we go there, check. There's a checklist to follow. If everything's okay, no problem, the landowner receives the money, and that's it. Here's some examples of areas we restore. So it's basically before and after. 2007, 2014, and here I don't have date. But just to have an idea what kind of job we are doing in the private lands. And that's all. Questions? Very, very brief. So it could be, we can provide money from this value chain through seed collectors, seeds, seedlings, and in a given project that we develop in the south region of Brazil, so São Paulo, Paraná, and Santa Catarina, 3 states in the south region of Brazil, we developed a project that the approach was create a restoration model with native species of economic interest. So how we do that? We started the first step was talk with the community. Wow, and it's kind of raise the local ecological knowledge. What kind of species they know? What kind of uses they usually do for those species? So understand what's the uses and the species that community knows, and how they know if they know management of those species. Oh, the second point, we take the list of species and make ecological model, ecological restoration model. Implant those trees or those projects by the local communities and to the further management. So let's see how we spend a lot of time talking with the people to find the species, to explain them that it's not a crazy thing to gain money from a native species. So we spend a lot of time, and then we walk through the areas and try to identify those species that they said. We find some and some we can't. And then different situations, from poor forest to degraded areas, pasture, and we walk it again. We go to other areas, we map those areas, identify where will be implemented those projects, different areas, and then we have a total amount. Here's the list of landowners interested and the total amount of land we implemented. And then we have the list of species they are interested to plant. all of them is native species in Brazil. And all of them, someone in the local community said, oh, maybe we can have some economical approach for this species. Because it has a good timber, because help us to make crafts, because any kind of reason. Because we can use as a fence. So that we try to follow in the restoration in Brazil. So the idea is to start from I would call starters or pioneer species, and then along the period, along the years, other species come, and the system become more complex. So you can put here a timeline. So the idea is to start with the pioneers species and end with the climax or the ends species. So we try, it's the way the tropical forest works. There's a lot of research for that, and in the restoration process we try to imitate that succession process. Okay. And then, remember that the list the species we make with the local community? We organize those species in starters, medium, ends, and fruits, medicinals. We just consult some references and prepare a list of the quoted species by community in that categories. And then we make, how can I say, it's like a draw, it's like a scheme of how those plants will be planted in the field. So here you can see we are highlighting one species that called Jussara. Jussara is a native palm that provides a juice very well acceptable for the markets. People love that, and actually it's pretty good. If you go to Brazil, you have to taste it. This is part of the marketing, right? Jussara. Yeah, it's called Jussara. People used to cut it, to take the top and eat it. So that species enter in the endangered situation. So now we are planting to use the seedlings to make juice. So it's a totally different approach. And it's a conservation approach for that species. So based on that model, we have the harvest plan. So first, the starters will come out. The starters could be used by charcoal, can be used by firewood, can be used for several things. But the economical focus is that timber, is the end, because the market value of that species, because it's so dense in wood, and you can make furniture with that, it's high. That species has a high aggregate value. So, but to get a species, you have to spend like 30 years, 40 years. So, the idea is that following the succession process, you are taking different incomes. So the first income could be crop. The second income could be starters to charcoal or other uses. The medium, the fruits, and finally the retreatment, the good timber to furniture that have a very good value. So we prepare that, and then to go to the field, we know how many making that scheme. We are able to calculate how many seedlings for each group we need to go to the area. Because you know, it's one of the most difficult parts in restoration is the transport. It's a lot of money. So you have to know that you are taking the right quantity of seedlings to the field. Otherwise, you can lose. If you get more seedlings, if you take more seedlings, they will probably die. If you take less, you take to make another travel, another transportation. So this is very helpful to planning the execution of the project. And this is another model. Remember the areas? We visit a lot of areas. So that model we call total planting. Total planting is to be applied in the degraded area. Imagine a degraded area, a pasture area. But in that situation, that model was drawn for an area like this, that there is a regeneration somehow, a regeneration expression. So you can use that regeneration as you don't need to cut everything. You know? So here is a different model. You can see that we are focused on Jussara also. So 2 lines of Jussara, because provide a good income. So, and all of them is native species. All of them is a native species. And here you can see the number of Jussara per hectare. It's much higher because in our ecological restoration model, we define that this will be the chief species or the boss species. Is the species that we are focused on energy, because that species provide more incomes. I have some videos about that. This is an animate model to have you an idea how things will work on that and the total planting model. So this is a degraded area, a pasture, and in the first year you plant the trees. So the trees is planted. Now, in the end of first year, can you see there is starters and there is fruits also, there are end species, and then third year. Third year you have to make some management, you know, to guarantee that some trees will grow tall. So here inside you can see there's some organic matter inside the model. So here's 7. So that model will not put croplands in the beginning, but it's possible to do. You see, it's very dense. It's very dense. Very dense. Look, two trees in a small species. What? Yeah, it's around 12. Of course, you have to get a management procedure to get that. So, and then in the 12th year, and then in the year 17, you start to harvesting wood. But until there, you are collecting fruits, right? You are getting some money from that. Here we are starting to collect. And you collect one and you plant the other. So it's a kind of a sustainability model. You make it happen. And now, as the trees are bigger, you have to get more space between them. So you are managing the space between the trees along the years. just so you have an idea how that model works. And can you see that the quantity of organic matter here? It's a lot. So you don't need it to fertilize because you have organic matter. So now continue management process. So for example, a guy in the top in the top could make a measurement like that. Okay.